All right, so tonight we're going to do a slightly different sort of a shoot. So we actually need to do it at night for the way that we're going to try approaching it. And, I've been trying to figure out a few different things for us to do in Photo 2 that are a little bit different. Normally we'd be doing a lot of studio lighting inside of the classroom, but we don't really have the opportunity to do that we're not supposed to be sharing equipment and those sort of things. So I've been trying to come up with some ways that we can, kind of explore some other ideas. So we've been doing some product lighting, and we've built a DIY light as well. So we're going to kind of use some of those concepts together and do kind of a different sort of approach, kind of a painting with light. We're going to be lighting basically a bottle, right? And so, the other day we did some collecting of items, and one of the things we were supposed to get was like a glass bottle that had some color to it. And so we're going to be using that. And one of the other things you were supposed to get was a reflective surface. So what I'm going to use is actually just a piece of glass, and this just came out of like a picture frame, and I'll put it back in the picture frame later. I think I'm actually going to put down some black so it'll be nice and dark. And then we're going to use our DIY lights. So I'm going to use this one just so that we have some softness to it. Again, we don't want just specular highlights like we talked about today. Earlier, we're going to use our flashlight. You could use a lamp if you wanted to, or some other light source if you want a little bit of a brighter thing. I'm going to shoot it all on the iPhone for the lowest common denominator so we can see that we could do this with anything. But obviously, if you've got a DSLR at home, by all means, go ahead and use that. But I want to make sure that it's something that everybody in the class could do, that we're not limiting our options. So basically, we're going to have just a setup. It's going to have a black background. We want to keep it a little bit away from our subject as best we can so that we have some inverse square law happening. And then I'm just going to kind of walk you through it. We'll just, fast forward through a lot of it, but kind of the basic setup. And then we'll kind of experiment with some colors and some other things as we kind of get going. So let's just jump on in and start getting our setup going. So the first things first, I want to be able to control exposure, and I don't want the iPhone to start doing things with kind of night exposure and things. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to camera. It just allows me to control f-stop and shutter speed a little bit differently. And once we get set up, I'll start to use that and do some of our settings for that. So I'm just going to get it in the basic, general vicinity of where I want. I want to pick up a lot of reflection off of that glass, and I also want to pretty much fill the frame with that glass. So I'm just kind of looking generally so that I get enough of that glass in place, so I know that I'm close enough. And I'm using the telephoto, so I'm using the back telephoto camera. That way, again, telephoto lenses pull in the background and make them a little bit closer to our actual, to our subject. So, and I think, so I've got like a black sheet. So what I'm going to do is I don't want to see the wood through here. So I'm going to go ahead and put the black sheet down. Now, if you don't have a black sheet, you could just also use, a t-shirt or anything else. This part, again, it doesn't have to be perfect. That's my mantra lately. It doesn't have to be perfect. All right, and I'm kind of cheating that back just a little bit so that, let's go right there because this was showing. I don't think it's going to matter. Now, when we put our bottle in place, I'm going to cheat it back a little bit so we have more surface for it to reflect onto. There we go. We're pretty close, at least as far as our general framing. Yeah, so we want a nice, surface. You can see now that's just glass, but it's highly reflective, especially once you put black behind it. Now you could put another color behind there if you wanted, a little bit something different. You could put gold or something else. But I'm just going to kind of generally kind of square it up a little bit and make sure that I'm shooting, straight into it as best I can so that that horizon line is also square. There we go. And you can see like my camera, even if I barely touch it, it's on a tripod, but it still has a woggle to it. So I'm going to use the remote shutter to do our exposures once we actually get to shooting. Okay, so there's our bottle. And I'm going to see if I can just put it inside of the chair. So this is my black reflector. You could use something else, but I think a black background will work, at least for what I'm doing. Obviously, you guys can always modify this. I'm just doing an example of how we could do it if you want to create more of a set. Now, the little handles, from the chair are showing. I could maybe lower this. See if that makes a difference. It's better. Yeah, and I know I can clean that up as well. I could see if I've got enough of this fabric. I might be able to hang that over there. I mean, obviously I want to do whatever I can to fix things prior to shooting, because yes, I can fix it in post-production, but if I don't have to, then I can save time in Photoshop, right? So I'm just going to cheat this back a little bit. There we go. That's better. All right, so since I moved my bottle, let me go ahead and re-straighten that back up. This Pellegrino. Make sure we can see the whole thing. This Pellegrino. Okay, that looks pretty good. I think I'm seeing a little bit of that back label, so I'm going to come up just so that it's square. So I'm just going to drop this a little bit in the camera angle and then point it up. Also shooting from a lower camera angle, again, that makes it feel larger than life and other things too. So I think that'll be better. Plus, then I don't catch that back label. Okay, that looks pretty good. Come on, Pancake, you can come in too. Cat crossing. All right, so now we've got our bottle pretty much in place. The light looks horrible, but that's okay. This isn't the way that we're going to light it. So we're generally set up, at least as far as our, having our background and bottle in place. So then I'm gonna go ahead and we're gonna use our diffusion material and our flashlight for our lights. All right, so that gets rid of our light. Now, you can see now that we've got a larger kind of light source that the reflections on here are starting to become a little bit nicer. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to build this up in layers, right? We're not going to take the whole picture all at one time. So we're going to be exposing for different parts of the camera, or different parts of our different parts of the picture that we want, right? So what I'm gonna do is, you can try different angles. Yeah, that might be good. Because what I don't want is I don't want a big old reflection on the label, right? Because obviously the label is gonna be pretty important. And let's just do a couple of settings really quick. So I'm gonna go ahead and lock my exposure, and I'm gonna set the focus so that that is as sharp as it'll go. Maybe about there. And then I'm going to keep that locked. And then the other thing is exposure. Let's see if we can do a custom exposure. I don't want super high ISO. Look what happened over here. It's all the way at the maximum ISO. So I want the lowest ISO because I'm okay with bringing up the shutter speed. So that's going to be okay. So I'm going to bring up that shutter speed all the way down to maybe a second if I can. And then if I need to increase ISO, and I can get this closer, right? But I could bring up ISO a little bit and still be okay. Now, now that we've got the exposure locked, I'm gonna go ahead and grab my remote shutter. Go ahead and get that turned on. And let's see if it automatically works. Looks like it took a picture. Okay, great. So the reason I want to use the remote shutter, again, is so that I don't have to touch the camera, because the camera will bounce around and create, shake and things like that. So we're going to be taking a series of pictures. So again, I don't want a big reflection on that, on the actual front of the bottle. So I'm going to just kind of move the light around. And again, there's reflections that I don't like in the glass, but that's okay. So I'm just going to try to move this around a little bit and do a couple of, make sure I get the edge over on this side. There we go, that looks better. Let's get some maybe from this side as well. And so again, I'm just trying to get good illumination on that, on the actual front label of the bottle. Now, I don't like the reflections that are happening in the actual glass, but that's okay because we're going to be building this up in several layers of exposure. So I think we've got several of the label. And so now let's maybe look at that top label. So the one up here. So we don't want it too bright, but we want to make sure it's getting a good exposure as well. So I'm going to go ahead and, just to be safe, I'm going to shoot a couple more of our label here, just to make sure that we've got what we wanted. There we go. So I'm having to hold it just a little bit higher in order to get that exposure. Okay, so now we've gone on both sides, making sure that both sides have good fill, so we've got good exposure across there. We go a little bit higher and get that top label, make sure that it's getting good illumination. Now, what we want to start to do is, we want to give the actual, with glass, usually it's the edge of the glass that's going to be the part that really matters. Now, so what I want is basically, see how now we're starting to get a highlight on this side over here. So we're going to actually, I can probably back this out a little bit. Well, closer it is, the bigger it is, right? And so we're going to do a couple of exposures, and I'm just going to basically bring it along this edge here, and we'll do it in a series of exposures to give us that kind of edge light. Okay, so we'll just start up here at the top. I'm going to come around this way. I want a really kind of a thin rim light over here, just on this edge of the bottle. And now it's a 1 second exposure, so I'm actually going to paint a little bit because I think it's a little bit too bright. So during it, I'm going to move it as well. So I'm just going to do a couple of passes. I'm going to try a few from back over here as well. All right, then we need some over here on this other side of the bottle. So I'm going to try to do like a quick pass during our 1 second exposure. So I'm going to click it and move it. I'm just going to move it a few times, just to see how that draws that line. Okay. So hopefully some of those will work. Okay, we got cat crossing number 3 coming up. All right, so just to double check, let's see if, yeah, it's processing, but, and again, we don't, if we get a few of the bag in there, that's okay. What really is going to matter is we're going to be putting these all together in their own little strip, so it's okay. Let me just double check and make sure our exposure didn't get set. I'm going to drop down to 15, so we're going to bring that back up to a second. Great. All right, so then we might want to get some of the top of the bottle. So I'm just going to kind of hold the light up here. I'll shoot a couple, maybe get some slightly different variations of some reflections on there. Now, sometimes people will shift the focus at that point. Again, I'm using my phone, so I don't want to touch it. So if you were on a device where you had the ability to switch the focus without moving the camera, you might want to do that. My background maybe got bumped a little bit. All right, so that takes care of the kind of the reflections part of things. So what we need to do now is I want to put some light through the actual glass. And so let's try one here really quick. We'll see if that's too much light. So I'm just going to actually kind of point the light up a little bit. And I'm going to kind of start at this low angle here. Okay. So let's see if that works at all. And let's see if it's too much. It could be that it's way too much. So I think we've got way too much glow. So based on that, that's too much light. So let's try, we'll just take our exposure down. So that was at a, let's see, we're at 15. Let's just bring it down to like maybe 100 or somewhere close to that. And we'll see what that looks like. So that's looking a little bit better. It's getting, at least the exposure part's bright, isn't so bright. So we'll try a couple more that way. And again, we can kind of just shoot these a little bit more quickly. Because now we're shooting at 100th of a second. And I'm just going to take one, kind of trying to make this kind of thin, and just see what that's able to do. I don't know. It might show up. Might be too much. So let's take a quick look. So it looks like we're getting some glow through there. How's that? So I'm just kind of crumpling this up. I want it to soften. I don't want that point, that circle that we were getting before, but I want a little bit more of a kind of glow through there. So maybe that will help focus that a little bit. I'm going to try a few from over here too, just see if we can push some light through there. All right, so at least we've got some glow going on inside of there. And then the next thing that we need to do is we're going to do a little bit of exposure for our background. And so that's where some of our colored lights might come into play. But I think blue maybe would be kind of cool because they're both cool colors, but I think maybe it'll get some contrast. There's already that blue in the other part of the Pellegrino. Or maybe we can do like a mixture of blue and green in our background. So I'm going to reset our exposure. And let's go ahead and get our exposure down, again, deck to a 1 second exposure. And I'm going to lower the ISO as well. All right. And so what we're going to do, or what I'm going to do, is just click the shutter and kind of just move around. Okay, so let's take a quick look and see what we got. Yeah, so you can see we're getting some interesting kind of colored effects back there, and actually it's probably lighting up the bottle better than pointing it straight through there. So what I'm going to keep doing is I'm just going to do a few more using the blue, and then we're going to try a couple with some of the other colors as well. All right, so we got a couple more effects back there. Okay, great. So I'm gonna go ahead and switch, and I'm gonna go to green. Now green isn't very strong, but it might just give us a little bit. Maybe it'll mix a tiny bit of red in with the green. Why not? It's a little bit funky. So let's take a quick look and see how those are doing. Yes, it's kind of giving more of a brown color to it. There's not a lot of green in it. I'm gonna go ahead and switch over and try some of the red. Maybe a little bit of red with a little bit of the blue maybe. So we don't really know what we're gonna get until we shoot a bunch and see what they actually look like. Yeah, so we're getting some little rainbowy effects and things in there because I kind of have it pushed through so that all three of the colors are semi-visible. So we'll just try a couple more. So I'm trying to move it forward and back, just to kind of experiment with how it's going to write or create that shape that it's doing. So let's check one more time, see how our images are doing. Yeah, we're getting some interesting effects now. We've got enough to kind of play with inside of our, I'm just gonna do a couple kind of low. I wanna make sure I've got that good reflection and a little more light coming through that bottom edge of the glass. And then I think we'll be done. All right, so now we're getting some other effects as well. And yeah, we're definitely getting a little more light through that bottom part of the bottle. That one should work pretty well, this one here. Here we're getting a lot of light through that bottom part of the bottle. So when we need to piece things together, I can use, something like that to kind of help us. And then, yeah, getting a nice clean illumination through that glass so it really shows the green. Do we have some that have good light in the neck? Yeah, so like this one's got good light in the neck part. Yeah, so again, we're doing it all in these little bits and pieces, even something like that, like how cool that looks, like just that green rim edge light. So I think we've got a lot of things to play around with. Go ahead and turn back on our light. So there we have it, that's our DIY lighting shoot for a glass bottle. And especially making sure that we're getting illumination through that darkened glass, right? And that was really one of our challenges. So definitely when you think about what you're going to take a picture of, think about how it's going to be able to read. We want something other than just a clear glass, so that we have that. So maybe it's like an olive oil or something like that. And really just play around, try experimenting, have the lights off, use your DIY lights, move them around, use different color gels, experiment, try different things. And then again, we're gonna have a ton of pictures, and then what we'll be doing is we're gonna be basically using Photoshop to stack those up and bring out those best areas of each of them so that we have one composite shot that has like the perfect lighting for our glass bottle.